Listen, this Boris Johnson equating Ukraine and Brexit, even in the same speech, even in the same building, even in the same country, you're the Prime Minister, grow up. OK, so that's what we're going to do a little bit later on. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's not an election going on now. Stop electioneering. We don't need to hear it. If the spring statement on Wednesday from Rishi Sunak is anything like that, it's going to be a complete pain in the backside. And you know it is. Just run the place. Lead and show leadership by example. Jacob Rees-Mogg the other day made a fool of himself. And now Boris Johnson, it's the same thing. Did he not read that speech? Yeah, I'm not doing Boris Johnson this hour. We're going to do it next hour, but I'm absolutely clear. It makes my blood boil. Jacob Rees-Mogg saying it was trivial, Partygate and all that. In 36 years' time, it will be considered trivial and fluff and all this. It's just not now. There's some really serious stuff going on. You want to sound like Churchill? Don't worry about sounding like Churchill. Just act as a leader. Good boy. All right? We voted for you. We may not again, but we did last time. So can we just get through this? That was a bit silly of Boris to do that yesterday, wasn't it?
Well, the only thing that is silly is that it was perfectly predictable that the press would take that as a straight comparison, when I think what he was doing was not comparing the situations, but was comparing the will to be free. Now, I did something very similar when I was speaking in the European Parliament, and I drew examples from history. And one of the examples I chose was various slave rebellions at different times. And everybody said, oh, you're comparing the EU to slavery. No, what I was talking about was the will to be free to determine one's own destiny. I think the Prime Minister's error of judgment was in assuming that the press and media wouldn't actually, take the distorted view of what he was trying to say.
No, I'm not taking a distorted view of it. I just think it was crass.
Well, an exaggerated view. I think you're saying what he is saying is there is a will there to be free, and that will expresses itself in all manner of different ways, some very dramatic, some less dramatic.
Yeah. No, listen, I understand it. I mean, it just comes on the back of what Jacob Rees-Mogg was talking about with Partygate the other day. I mean, if this is an election campaign off and running, then I think they've got off on the wrong foot. That's all I'm saying. It wasn't fluff and trivial that the rules that you put in place, Mr. Rees-Mogg, that, you don't follow yourself or Whitehall doesn't follow. I feel exactly the same thing. It's just, it's a very personal, very human judgment. I would have looked at a speech like that if somebody had written it for me, or even if I'd written it for myself. And I'd have, like we do, Anne, you read it out and you go, I'm not sure about that. But he didn't pull back from that. That's his judgment. He thought that was an okay thing to do. I bet you, actually, maybe you would have written it out because you said in the European Parliament about the slavery and the comparison and whatever. It's, maybe you would have done. But would you have done that at a time when people are buried alive in a theatre?
I think I might have stressed as I did it that I wasn't comparing the two situations. I think I might have done that, but I might still have made the point about the will to freedom, because I think it's an important one. And I do think, and I know this is a plea that's going to fall on deaf ears, but I do think occasionally you should listen to what politicians are trying to say rather than making a superficial judgment as to what they're saying.
Would Russia have invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump had been in the White House?
Well, I think not only would they have invaded the Ukraine, the Article 5, the NATO treaty would have been revoked by Donald Trump. He would have broken up NATO. He told General Kelly he was going to do that. He told John Bolton he was going to do that. He mentioned it in passing to Jim Mattis and Mike Pompeo. I think there'd be very few sanctions coming from the United States. Perhaps there would be Western European and UK sanctions, but there would be little to no sanctions coming from the United States. There obviously would have been a revolt in the Congress related to that. But the notion that Donald Trump would have been tough or strong on Putin is not congruent with the facts. He's been a Putin apologist for the last 5 years. And Rachel, there's an expression in Italian that translates into English. If you hear clippity clop when you open the window, it's a horse, it's not a zebra. And so Donald Trump is an apologist for Vladimir Putin. And I think we'd have more pressure in the Western alliance right now, perhaps a complete breakdown. And God only knows how much more desecration would be happening in the Ukraine and perhaps other Eastern European countries.
So it's been lucky. I mean, Biden hasn't been much of a strong man. He's basically laid out his cards on the table. He said that NATO's not going to enforce a no-fly zone. But you're saying that Donald Trump would have almost been an enabler to this incursion into Ukraine, and NATO would have, and also he would have undermined the NATO response to this incursion. Yeah?
Yeah, well, not only am I saying that, though, I mean, that would be Ambassador John Bolton, his former national security advisor, the former White House chief of staff would say that. Trump made it very clear that in his second term, he wanted to abolish NATO. He also made it very clear that, he was okay with Eastern European aggression related to Russia and Vladimir Putin. And lest anybody forget this, he was impeached the first time related to delaying anti-tank missile systems, the Javelin missile systems, to the Ukrainians. Of course, a lot of that material got there late. Some people feel in the United States and in the military that the Ukrainians, had they been more fortified by the Trump administration, it would be even more unlikely that Vladimir Putin would have potentially attacked, but Trump slowed down those armaments. So he made the catastrophe worse, as he does with most things. And but you got this beat going on the right and in right-wing media like Fox News pretending otherwise. But again, that's not what the facts are. The facts are he was a Putin apologist and a Putin enabler.
What is the danger you fear of this going nuclear?
I think the chances are pretty remote. I think Putin bluffed a couple of weeks ago when he announced he was raising the alert status of his nuclear forces. The heads of U.S. intelligence agencies testified publicly about 10 days ago that they saw no operational change in the nuclear forces. And I think Putin has to worry that if he ever crossed that line, that even the Biden administration would treat it as a suicide note on his part.
Okay, suicide note there, your words. Just finally, and very briefly, I know that you've not been particularly complimentary about the way that President Biden has handled this. What about your old boss, Donald Trump? What would he have done?
Well, I've said, and I believe if Trump had been reelected, Putin would be in Kyiv already.
Olympic medalist Sharron Davies is with me, and she's been very brave on this subject to be so outspoken. Sharron, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. Nice to hear your voice.
It's very nice to hear yours as well. Tell me what you're up to at the moment, because when I say that you've been brave to have a voice on all this, it's true, isn't it? It certainly had an effect on you.
Yeah, it's a very toxic subject to speak about, and unfortunately what's happened is that athletes have been silenced, coaches have been silenced, people have been silenced, from voicing their honest concerns. And this isn't about stopping anyone from doing sport. This is about trying to find the right categories for people to race in. The last thing I'd want to do is for anyone not to be able to compete. But it does have to be fair, and we know that there's a difference between a biological male and a biological female. We only have to look at any event, any sport, any Olympic result to see the difference. And it ranges between about 10% and 30% when you look at weightlifting. So the more explosive, the bigger the gap. And that cannot be removed by just suppressing testosterone, for a year once somebody who's male has gone through male puberty. So we just have to find a better solution, really. And you're right. I mean, the only thing I would disagree with is that Lia Thomas is in the women's event. Lia Thomas is not a female. Lia Thomas is still a male and will always be a male. That's never going to actually change and has gone through male puberty. So you're right. I mean, when they were competing as a male on the men's team, they couldn't break the top 500. And then this year they become number one in the NC2As, which is the university system in America, on the way to beating 3 Olympic silver medalists that were in that race. So women are going to lose the ability to win their own races. It's just ridiculous.
This is the essence of the argument. I'm not talking about single sex spaces. I'm not talking about women's refugees. I'm not talking about prison. I'm not talking about anybody who may have been born a male and transitions and as a female. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm going to ask people a very specific question. Does this feel fair? Don't win everything when you're competing as a man. Win everything when you're competing as a female. Is that fair to women? It doesn't. It's just so obvious to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's having that conversation and finding a solution. So, My solution to the problem would be a protected female classification and an open and inclusive and welcoming classification. I mean, you've talked about the controversy. When Lia touched the wall, nobody clapped. It was silent. When the girl that came second touched the wall, there was a huge round of applause. You mentioned the photograph with the three of them, were being pictured together. That meant that the girl that came fourth did not get onto the medal podium. There was a ninth place girl who didn't make it to the final. There was a swimmer from Penn, female swimmer from Penn, who didn't make it onto the team. Yeah. So there were at least 5 females in that one race that lost out on their opportunities because of Lia being given the chance to race in a category which she doesn't, in my opinion, qualify for, because she's not biologically female. So find a better solution, because everyone is entitled to do sport and they should do sport and we should be welcoming, but it has to be fair, and whatever the males are entitled to in sport, the success that they're entitled to, females should be entitled to equal opportunities, whether that's winning trophies, getting scholarships, prize money, accolades, whatever. I don't understand why, women are now being discriminated against in their own category of sport.
I was just thinking, if in this same set of circumstances, 3 years on from transitioning, or saying I am now a female, I wonder how many women would be in the main draw at Wimbledon if men were competing against them. And I can tell you what the answer is. It's none.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's not a single one, and that's
no,
because it's a different.
Well, here's a really interesting stat. So if you just take the women's 100 meters on the track, last year in America alone, there were 5,000 males that ran faster than the world record for the women's 100. Yeah. And some of those were as young as 15.
Yeah, but that's junior high school. It's high school and it's college. I mean, there's just differences between men and women. And when you're talking about tiny margins, and I know that you know all about that, 0.1 of a second is massive. Half a second is huge. She's won the NCAAs by 1.75 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, we spend millions around the world trying to stop people from cheating from taking drugs. By actually shaving off points of a second so that they become Olympic champions. And now we're going to give away 10, 20, 30% advantage. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So the conversation has been closed down, and that's been the toxic part. The great news is actually that USA Swimming did come up with a system, but the NCAAs chose not to take it. And FINA, which is the governing body for swimming, have actually got a process in place at the moment, which they're intending to release very soon. And I think that will change this. Lia wouldn't have qualified based on the USA Swimming set of rules. It was the fact the NCAAs decided to basically put in a set of rules that said that you identify 1 year away from the games, you reduce your testosterone to 10 nanomoles. 10 nanomoles is 10 times what most females have in the system. Is that right? So even reducing it to the amount that they say they reduce it to 1 year, it's nowhere near what biological females have in our system.